Hey everyone, welcome to Mouths of the Merrimack. I'm Captain Chris, here with
Dandy O'Daddy.
and today we have a very special guest. Even though you and I today, we're both working on our boats, getting them ready.
Yep.
Very excited for that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Wish there was 10 hours that I could have worked on the boat today, but I only got about 3, so I'm going to have to pick it up again tomorrow, I guess.
Yep, I'm gonna have a little bit more to do tomorrow, but just painting the bottom and buffing the sides out, and I think we're ready to go. Any day. Got my first charter this weekend, and we have a guy who's fortunate enough to not have to get a boat ready. He can just go out there and go fishing right now.
I don't have to get a boat ready. No, I guess I'm fortunate in that regard, but there's all sorts of things we miss out on by not having a boat. So it's a give and take, I guess.
Well, so our guest today is Mr. Steve Gallant. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, man.
Doing very well. Thank you for coming out tonight. So yeah, we
Thank
kind
you
of
for
already
having
got.
me.
For those of you guys might recognize Steve. He's been a writer. He does a lot of fishing videos, does a lot of seminars around surfcasting up in this area and really up and down the coast, Steve. So thank you for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me on.
I know we've been following each other. I've known you for a while now, and just always interested in what you're doing. And you have my utmost respect as an angler, man. You are a badass. You are out there all the time, and you put up some impressive stuff. So
that's very kind of you to say. Appreciate it. I've known Chris. I worked as a charter boat mate on a charter boat that was very friendly with Chris, so I got to know Chris through the charter boat fishing business in the Merrimack. So
yeah, you made it for Pete.
I made it for made it for Pete
Paul, right?
and for Paul, both of those guys.
Yeah, good dudes. I talked to them both on the phone today. We were all banging our knuckles on the boat.
I'm sure you guys are all doing the same exact things.
Yeah.
I don't know what Pete has for a new boat this year, but I'm sure he has something new that
he's got like 9 of them
on.
just kicking around.
Yeah,
no big
he's
deal.
always buying new boats.
Maybe he'll let you borrow one day.
Maybe.
I don't know. You got that surf thing dialed in, dude. I'm always interested in reading your articles and watching your videos. So you bring a lot to the table, man. I appreciate it. So I want to kind of go on that real quick. You've written articles in the past. You're wearing your Surfcaster's journal shirt on, right?
Yep.
How often do you contribute to them?
It's not on a regular basis. It's not as regular as I contribute to on the water.
Yeah.
But I usually a few times, 2 or 3 articles a year. Usually I'll do with Surfcaster's journal.
Yeah.
I'm in the works of ironing out a couple more articles for the upcoming year with the editor right now. So I'll definitely have some more articles coming out with them in the future. In addition to that, I also do the monthly the Northshore report for On the Water for our area. So that's a fairly regular gig with them.
Yeah, that's a pretty sweet deal, man. And so you're, like you say, you're pretty much fishing up in the northeast part of Massachusetts, New Hampshire area, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Yep. Sorry, I live in Gloucester now. I used to live. I lived for years up on Plum Island, so I spent a lot of time fishing Plum Island and the Merrimack. Then I made the move down to Gloucester a few years ago. So I fish a little bit more around the Cape Ann area now, but I still make it up to Plum Island a few times a year.
Now, my question to you, what are the fisheries that much different? Because I feel like on the south side of Cape Ann, I don't really get down there too often.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do, it's just like a whole nother planet to me. Like the whole structure along the shoreline, the deep water that they have access to, and the rock piles. Whereas like on Plum Island, you just got sand for the most part.
Huge expanses of beaches. And, Plum Island was... When I fished Plum Island, from a shore perspective, it was about, there was a few spots that we would fish, on a regular basis that structure-wise, like especially down the south end of the island, you have Emerson Rocks and you have those boulder fields down there. So those tend to always attract fish. But then you have areas like the middle of Plum Island where it's really just a humongous open beach and there's not a lot of structure there for fish to gravitate towards. So kind of like we have to do and the charter boats have to do is we just have to cover a lot of ground when we're fishing areas like that. if you're lucky enough, obviously, to stumble upon some sort of surface feed or, some sort of surface activity, that can be good because you have a lot of beach to move to that, surface area or surface activity. But it was definitely a huge learning experience when I moved down to Cape Ann, and it's very different fishing off the rocks. Access is a little tougher in some of the areas. It's a little
Yeah.
trickier to park in some of the areas. Some of the best fishing spots have $1 million houses, in front of them, and they don't take too kindly to folks trudging through their yard or standing out in front of their houses surfcasting. So
How's that
you have to
work
get.
in that world? Do people ask for permission, like kind of like the hunters do?
So there's a thing. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but there's literally old colonial laws that relate to fishing and fouling. And as long as you are below, I think it's the
Yeah,
median
the mean high tide.
high tide mark.
Yep.
If you're there for the purpose of fishing or fouling, like,
Sure.
you have the right to be there. People don't own, for the most part, nowhere in Rockport or Gloucester, with a few exceptions, none of those homeowners own below the high tide mark. So they can come out and they can cause a fuss. But as long as you're there, you got to that spot legally. You didn't trespass through their property, and you're there fishing and doing it in a legal way. There's not really a lot they can say to you. But that being said, it's challenging to legally get to some of those
Yeah,
spots. So
because it's not like that idea of open beach where you can just park somewhere and then walk straight like a mile or
yeah,
two. You got more treacherous
yeah.
terrain, I would assume, down
Yeah,
there.
definitely off the rocks. It's like there are sometimes you can get down a certain area of rock face, but that you might literally hit a cliff face, and there's no way to get around that. So, yeah, it has its challenges for sure.
What do you find? Do you find any difference in the fishing? Like, are there different lures, different styles that you tend to use in one place over the other?
Oh, for sure. When I'm fishing off of a beach, I'm, for the most part, fishing a lot lighter lures, in the sense that they're not as well, I shouldn't say lighter. They're, for the most part, a lot shallower running.
Hmm.
I'm generally not running, especially the beaches around here. I mean, within casting range of the beach, it's pretty rare that you're going to find really deep water. So, I mean, most of the beaches around here, you're only casting down into 10, 15 feet of water from the shore. So you don't need a super deep running lure. Um, but there's a lot of lures. Surface lures are all the same. I still use pencil poppers like I do off sandy beaches. I still use spooks. But that being said, I do throw heavier stuff that gets down deeper in the water column, heavier bucktails, heavier jig heads on soft plastics. Um, you do have to also worry about getting snagged in the rocks. So you do want to get down deep, but unlike a beach where the worst thing that's going to happen is you're just going to dredge through some sand, you can get caught up in some craggy rocks down there, that will, you'll get broke off. So
Yeah.
you have to kind of keep that in mind as well.
And do you have to compensate for those rocks and the fish making big runs by like upping your gear a little bit? Like, are you fishing heavier line and leader? I
I
would think so.
definitely I definitely beef off my tackle for the rocks, and I run a heavier drag. I mean, like I said, off the beach, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to have a fish that's going to run, and he's going to run you into some sand. There aren't a lot of obstacles off of a beach that a fish is going to run you over and break you off. There's plenty of barnacle covered rocks there that are, once they get your braid over that, they're going to bust you off in a second. So a little stouter rods a lot of times. I'm probably running a tighter drag because I want to stop those fish before they get a chance to run into something that they can break me off on. So a little bit different in that sense, but a lot of it's the same. The biggest changes are just, how you approach the fishing. The rocks are extremely dangerous sometimes, so it's you got to pick your spots and pick your days, and know when to look at the rocks and go, that's not a good idea to go out there today. And I've definitely gone out there a few times when it was like, okay, that wasn't a great idea. I've had my share of close calls, so I've hopefully learned from those.
Well, we try, and you're doing this at night most of the time, right? So
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times at night. Yeah.
You think you learn your lesson until there's a huge surface feed going on.
Right. It's hard. It's hard to put that part of your brain aside and be like, it's not worth it for a fish. In the moment, it seems worth it. So, I mean, you guys know, I'm sure you guys have put your boats in some situations where you're like, that might not have been the smartest thing to do with my boat, but I really wanted to get close, to that, whatever was going on.
There was a time last year I was down in that area fishing, and I was in about 15 feet of water, and we were catching like 40-pound fish, and then I look at my depth reading, and it was like 2.5 feet. It was all rocks. I'm like, oh no, I gotta get out of here.
And all it takes is one of those rollers too to catch the boat and just push it like up into the rocks. Like, yeah. I mean, I remember having, like, even being a mate on the boat, I was amazed at how close Paul and Pete would get to like just the jetties. Like, you could touch the jetty with the tip of your rod, and we were floating by it at 4 or 5 knots, So there's all sorts of sketchy things that we do for fish, right?
Well, yeah, sometimes you got to do that. You got to get into where they are, and if you feel confident about your boat, feel confident about your legs, depending where you are. Yeah. You got to get in those little nooks and crannies, to give yourself an opportunity, because those big fish, could be where they're hanging,
Do you guys do much night fishing in your boats?
I don't. I mean, I used to back when I worked on the party boats, do a lot more. Yeah. I'm lucky if I get out once a season right now, just because it kind of throws off my whole sleep schedule.
True, and you guys are chartering literally every day in the summer. So that would be
the thing, like the whole sleep schedule thing. If that thing gets messed up, there's not enough time in the day, unfortunately.
Would you ever like try and maybe market like night trips to people that are like maybe looking to specifically, take a break for like a few days and be like, I'm going to run some night trips and try and target, like, see if people are interested in doing some night excursions?
To be honest with you, in my predicament, like, I get a couple people that ask me every year, and I'd be more than happy to. I think it would be really great. If I could figure out the sleep schedule thing, I will say this from a charter perspective. If I were to do it, I definitely would want to know the people firsthand, and see kind of like what level they're at. Right. Because if it's a charter game and someone's like, oh, I heard their fishing's really good at night, I want to try it at night, but they don't really have a lot of experience, casting, like they have to be a little bit more self-sufficient at night. True. I would feel like, because I'd have to be super hyper aware of where everything is. I mean, the spots that we would be fishing at night. Yeah.
Your focus has to be on the boat and keeping you guys safe. And you're right. That's a good point. I guess I didn't think of that.
I think with the night,
you really need some self-sufficient anglers for that.
Definitely. The safety aspect of it is huge. Someone falls out or goes over. Yeah. You're not going to find them.
I've always wondered, and I have a ton of respect for guys that go out and fish consistently at night. Like that is super, like, people say that like surfcasting is going out at night is intimidating. I think guys that go out there and fish in boats at night, like in this area with all the sandbars, and just, you have to know that, I guess maybe it's a little easier now with electronics and you can maybe plot a course and that way exactly where you're going. But that's crazy to me, some of the guys that go out at night and fish in some of these areas out of boats. That's equally as crazy to me.
Those new moon nights coming out of the mouth and like not being able to see the waves in front of you and just kind of getting a feel for it, Yep. You can barely see like the outline of the jetty, and you're like, all right, I'm just gonna run this and see what happens. I know there's gonna be a wave coming up here. Maybe I'll just tone it down a little bit. But like it's the whole operation. I remember, this is actually kind of a funny story. I was in college. I think it was like a day before we were going back to like football camp. So I had a couple kids I played football with, and a couple of my buddies from high school. I think there was 4 of us. We were out night fishing, and we were anchored up and just chumming. We were back in the day, we were chumming herring and floating some herring back, and one of us was out in the on the bow casting, and I'll just never forget it. My buddy kept tying his own hooks, and he kept losing fish, and the hooks kept coming off, and I was gonna kill him. So he goes to tie on a new hook, and he puts the whole tray on the stern of the boat in the transom and throws on the light. Like, whatever, the light's on. I'm
Yeah.
casting an eel, and all of a sudden, like, fish start coming in. I got one buddy hooked up with the striper, and then all of a sudden, my rod with the eel goes off. And I don't know how it happened, dude. I was wearing cargo shorts, right? And on the little zipper of my cargo shorts, somehow my braided line went down into my zipper, and like went like, you know how the zipper swings a little bit?
Yeah.
It
yeah.
went right into that thing. So my line was going straight down to my leg,
Oh.
and the rod was going out. My buddy Steve, who played college football with me, he was like a 6'5" defensive end, goes, "What's this?" Flips a bluefish on the boat. The line snaps. My buddy Eric moves out of the way, knocks over all my terminal tackle.
Oh,
Hundreds
my
of hooks
God.
everywhere. Bluefish going on. I'm stuck to the side of the boat.
Yeah.
My buddy Dale just starts screaming because he's a madman. And then all of a sudden we lost power. So we got a
Oh.
bluefish on the deck. We got no lights, no
You got
power.
no power.
I'm stuck on this fish that's running. I think I just ended up cutting it off. And then all of a sudden the power came back on, and the boat was an absolute disaster.
Oh,
so when
my
I think
goodness.
of chartering at night, I think of
Yeah.
that situation.
Yeah.
Just how friggin' nuts it was. But you see a lot of cool stuff, man, too. Like sometimes when you're out in the boat in the ocean and you're by yourself and everything's so calm and
Yeah.
quiet. You know, I've seen deer run on the beach, like on the
Yep.
and stuff
I've
like
seen,
that.
yeah, I've seen deer come across early, and I had no idea deer went up into the estuaries as much as they do, but I've seen deer swimming. I mean, you've probably seen them swimming
Yep.
across the river and stuff like that.
Yep.
I had no idea. And if you're not out, early or those weird hours, you don't see stuff like that.
No, you don't. So it's just a whole nother life. And just I remember just like the sound of the waves when you're fishing the beach at night on a boat. It's just so relaxing. And then even, I've been to the canyons once, and then
That's
it
gonna
was
be
my
cool.
only trip. Dude, if I can't even believe there's so few people that have ever got to see anything like that at night.
And there's just no ambient light out there either,
None,
right?
dude.
Yeah.
None. You're a little dot. If you ever want to feel really super small,
Yeah.
go out to the canyons in 6,000 feet at night,
Yeah.
and just you see every star. It's just unbelievable. It's
That's
just
cool.
really, really, really neat. Do you know? Do you know anybody that might striper fish at night and use underwater lights? It's something I've always thought about. Like the tuna guys and
from
swordfish
what I
guys.
understand about stripers, and from what I understand, the lights kind of will spook them.
I would think so.
From what I understand, I think the lights will bring in bait fish, and from what I've seen, I know stripers will use shadow lines at night. So if
Yep.
there's some sort of like ambient light, like a bridge, or that consistently has the same area lit, the stripers will get used to that, and actually they'll use that to their advantage because they'll cruise on the outside of that, and they'll wait for anything to pass through it, and then they'll just hammer it. So yeah, a lot of people, but I don't know of anyone that
I can't think. I don't
uses
think I
will
know
set up a
anybody.
light. The only again, the advantage I could see to that would be if you set up a light. I think it would maybe attract a bunch of bait fish, and then
Yeah.
you might have bass that would come in. But I've never experimented with that. In my experience, everything about night fishing has been keep your light
Pitch
off unless
black.
you have a fish on, and then only when you have it on, we're only putting our lights on to take a picture.
Yeah.
If we're not taking pictures, I'm trying to use a red light, so it doesn't affect your night vision as much.
Do you still find yourself coming up here and fishing often, like on certain like things that you had in your old logbook, like tides, times, like all right,
Yeah.
I got to get to the spot? Or are you trying to find new ones down there off of Gloucester?
The last few years has been really trying to learn new things because,
Yeah.
I mean, not that I learned everything that there was to know about Plum Island. There's so much to know about an area like that. But I had put a lot of years fishing sand beaches, fishing cranes, fishing Plum Island, and it was exciting to be like, no, I'm going to really focus on the rocks this year and try and put that puzzle together. And I've had a lot of help with my buddy Brian O'Connor, who is a photographer and an amazing surfcaster, and he has been fishing this area a lot longer than I have, so he has taught me a lot and showed me a lot of, awesome things about this
Hang
area.
on, Steve. Can you hear us still?
I can never reveal to anyone else, but he's been very instrumental in helping figure out this area as well.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Like you fished up in this area for however long, and now that you live in Gloucester, you can't be leaving Gloucester to come to Plum Island, right?
I mean,
So
I
see
do
it.
make it up there a few times
Yeah.
a year. If I have to go to a tackle shop, I always go to Surfland.
Yeah.
Of course.
Surfland always has a place in my heart. I was devastated, like everyone else was, when Kay passed away. When I lived at Plum Island, I lived literally 2 doors down. I lived right next to Mr. Moe's package store in this
no kidding.
tiny little. I think it's still there. It's like there's a giant condo next to it now, but just next to that, there's a little cottage out behind this house, and I used to live in that little cottage that was right there. So I used to walk over. I mean, I used to walk to the beach for a couple years. I was in Surfland every single day. I mean, I would walk in and Kay would know by the shit-eating grin on my face that I had a good night like the night before. So,
You talk about
Surfland
fishermen having a
is-
sixth sense. Kay definitely did. She
Oh
always
my
knew what was
God,
up.
she would be like, "Oh yeah, someone had a good night last night. Let me see the pictures." So yeah, I miss Kay. I mean, I love Liz and Martha, but I like everyone else. I miss Kay.
Now, did you grow up on Plum Island, or did you just happen to live there when you were a little bit older?
No, I lived there when I was a little bit older. I grew up in Ipswich.
Oh, okay, so not too far.
A few towns over. Went to Ipswich High School. Yeah, grew up going to Cranes Beach. Used to fish there. My dad had growing up, my dad had a 21-foot center console that we used to take out on the weekends. We took it out of the Ipswich River, so we did a little bit of fishing. Nothing too hardcore, but yeah, we used to go out and catch some schoolies and stuff like that when I was young. So I've known Ipswich Bay since I was a young person.
When did you start getting really into it? Like, when did you start kind of focusing and be like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to get good at this.
So after college, I lived in Utah for a few years, and I was a snowboard bum for a few years. Just worked a bunch of low-paying jobs and snowboarded as much as I could, and then I moved back here. I wanted to be closer to the ocean, closer to my family, and when I moved back, was when I really threw myself back into surfcasting. I found Surfcaster's journal randomly, and I just became like, this is the kind of fishing that I want to do. And I just started to become a sponge. I just fished as much as I could. I learned as much as I could. I moved to Plum Island, and that was when I moved to Plum Island. It was when I really became a fish bum. I guess not a fish bum, but a striper, a surfcasting freak.
So, Steve, who would you say was like your best mentor when it came to surfcasting? Self-seeking?
In the early years, a lot of it was self-taught. When I moved to Plum Island, I started fishing with the Kellys quite a bit. I don't know if you know Ed and Andy and Tommy. I fished with them for a few seasons. I started wetsuiting. We all bought wetsuits together. We fished a ton. I learned a lot from the Kelly boys. I learned how to fish an eel from the Kelly boys. And yeah, so I would say, Ed and Andy and Tom were early. And I used to fish with Brendan from Surfland quite a bit.
Yep.
So, you know, those guys were definitely.
Well, you guys had the crew that you guys are all about around the same age, and you're living right down the street. Like how great did that work out?
We had a pretty good thing going there for a few years, and then even when I moved back to I lived on Plum Island for like 3 years. You know, got pretty tight with those guys, and then I moved back to Ipswich. But even still, we were wetsuiting a lot for a few years together. I have a ton of pictures of big fish with the Kelly boys. And then a few years later, when I got into making videos and stuff like that, I linked up with Brian. I knew Brian through his videos and stuff that he did. I mean, he was another early inspiration. I used to watch his YouTube videos and be like, when I was young in surfcasting and I wasn't catching much, I was like, how is this guy doing this? Like, I couldn't. He had a YouTube channel, and he just it was full of videos of him catching big fish, and it's crazy. Like, so funny story is I used to be a huge fanboy of his, and this was back when he was guiding. I sent him an email, and I was like, hey man, I'm a huge fan of your videos and your YouTube channel, and I was wondering, you know, if I could just tag along sometime. And he, like, I forget, it was a really cringy email that I wrote when I was way younger, and he saved the email, and he still shows it to me from time to time, because like we're really good friends now, and he still shows it to me from time to time. He's like, remember this? And I'm like, thanks, you know. So it's funny that it's kind of all come full circle like that, but you know, yeah, I consider Brian one of my good friends now. So
yeah, we meet a lot of our good friends through fishing too. Like half the guys that I still talk to today are kids I grew up working on the party boats with or fishing with on our own time. And it's a great community, dude. You know, people are pretty supportive of each other. And I feel like everybody we bring on this podcast always talks about how they have one or two fishing buddies that they share notes with, talk about, kind of speed up the process, you know, kind of figure it out together. And they're not like big groups of like 30, 40 people. No, but smaller groups of like 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe, you know.
Surfcasting is funny. Like, I feel like more than other forms of fishing, like surfcasters form partnerships, and it's really just like, it's usually one or two, it's just like a couple guys.
Yeah.
And part of that is because the transfer of information in surfcasting, and you guys know about that, like the intel, you know, the passing of intel
pictures, dude.
is you have to be so careful with who you share information with. And yeah, I think in a lot of ways, the smaller you keep your circle, you don't want to keep it too small, because then you're not getting enough information, but you don't want to make it too big, because then you're going to have a whole bunch of guys at your spot when you want to be fishing it. So I mean, and you guys
especially
know that,
when
like,
surfcasting, your space is so limited and mobility is a factor. It's not like you can just walk 2 miles and see 3 guys in your spot and be like, oh god damn it, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's from working a little bit on the boats too. I know how, like, even boat spots are only going to fit, you know. I mean, you're only fitting boats, 2 or 3 boats in a lot of the spots that I know of, unless you're fishing like a wide open bunker, a huge school of bunker that's just getting, you know, harassed by bass and bluefish. But yeah, it's the same thing with you guys. You guys know you got to keep that intel, you know, in their hands of the right people.
Yeah, I think a lot of the guys that we share information to are pretty good. Like, you know, we talk a lot more so after our trips about kind of like what, you know, when we're out there every day. And it's still pretty good just to know some information. But, you know, what I did today was good. What they did today was good. Or, you know, maybe one of us had a bad day, or we can just talk about it and figure out what the pattern is. But like you said, it's a small group. It's like 2 guys, 2, 3 guys, maybe, you know, seriously.
I see you guys, catching bait is so important for you.
Catching bait's important.
Yes. That's like when I was working on the charter boat, that was most of the chatter in the morning was like, hey, where are you guys finding mackerel? Are you guys finding mackerel over here? And then once everyone finds their mackerel, it's kind of everyone goes quiet and kind of goes to their spots, you know? Yep.
That's exactly how it works.
Well, it's such a key element of being on the boat, you know, finding the live bait. needs to happen. And when you have a little clique that everyone can kind of spread out and divide and conquer, it's that's like the true help is definitely the bait, I feel like.
Yeah, it's definitely the most annoying part of the day. Well, not annoying. It's just something I want to get done and get over with and get into
because
my
that's
fishing.
not what you're there for. You're there to go put customers on quality stripers. That's just,
dude. I'll tell you though,
too,
people fucking love mackerel fishing.
I was just gonna say that I was amazed at how many people were like, "This, we could just do this. Like, we're fine with this." I'm like, "No, we're gonna go catch actual fish now. These are just what we're using to catch the fish." It was amazing how many people were just. I was like, they were more than happy to just keep mackerel fishing.
My first year chartering, one of my clients was a woman my mom worked with and like her 8-year-old son. It was like, a later afternoon trip. And, oh, shoot, can you see us or hear us, Steve?
Yeah, I can see you.
Oh,
yep.
Okay, all right. I didn't know if the screen froze.
No, we're good.
We went out like, I don't know, late morning, early afternoon, and we had to go get bait. And we're catching mackerel, and the kid's just having a ball. We gave him like a half a sabiki rig. He's catching like 2 or 3 at a time, and he's getting the rhythm, right? And he's bailing them, and he goes, "I could do this all day." And I go, boom, this is great.
Boom.
We will just do this all day. That was the last mackerel he caught.
Oh,
for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we went striper fishing. We had an absolute ball. But it was just so funny how he's just like, "This is the best. I could do this all day." And then
for me, when I was helping work on the boat, catching bait was the most chaotic part of the day from a mate's perspective, because people would just be whipping like stringers and like, I don't know about you guys, but we always would cut the sabikis in half because there was no way we wanted that many like that's an insane amount of mackerel to be trying to unhook.
Well, you figure you got 5 people on the boat with a sabiki, each has 6 hooks, and when it's good and 5 people drop down, that's 30 mackerel flopping all over the place.
I felt sometimes like I was on like a Japanese game show where I would be on my hands and knees just trying to collect mackerel and throw them in a and I was like, this is like a Japanese game show. Like, collect as many mackerel as you can in 30 seconds and throw them like in the I was like, this is ridiculous. I hope I'm getting tipped today.
Try not to get a hook in your finger.
I love when there's like 2 mackerel like left in the live well and you get to fish one out, and it's like, it's like I always say, it's like an Olympic sport trying to catch that last mackerel in the tank.
I was always amazed. Paul would reach in like a Jedi and just grab that last one. That was, his skill was just no net, just boom, snatch it.
Dude, it is a skill. It is a skill to catch the mackerel. And when I have little kids, dude, like kids like under 8, they will sit and play in that bait tank all day. They don't care about anything else, and they keep slipping
them out. It's an aquarium that they're allowed to reach into and touch things. It's great.
And I'll tell them, I go, "You got to aim for the head," and they'll aim for the head, and they'll grab it, and they'll hold it up. Yeah. We had one kid put one in his mouth and bite it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever saw that on the boat.
It was always
Was it a bachelor party?
No, it was a little kid. His brother said, "You won't eat it," and he said, "I'll eat it."
Yeah, you guys, bachelor parties are a very popular thing on charter boats, huh?
Yeah, we get a bunch of them.
We had no shortage of those when I worked on the boat.
Yeah,
a lot of times they were
the 2-boat ones.
They were the most, I don't want to say interesting, but I mean, they sometimes got interesting.
Yeah, it's a different vibe for sure from a charter perspective.
What was your guys? What's your booze? What's your booze rules on the boat?
I just have no hard alcohol.
No hard alcohol. Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I try to keep everybody on the boat super busy so they're not drinking. Yeah. Like the way we fish. I mean, people who listen to this who might be from different areas and gone on charters. We do things a little bit differently than most around the coast. I mean, we're predominantly a live bait fishery, but we definitely do get our surface plug action and casting, through June. That kind of wanes off in July. And then you're mostly live bait drifting or anchored up or even light trolling with the mackerel. Yeah. And so what that does, it kind of puts a rod in everybody's hand at all times. You got to help catch bait. You want to catch a fish, you got to put a line in the water. I know I try to avoid it as much as possible, just throwing a line in and trolling it around.
Right.
I mean, even when I troll mackerel, like I try to fish 4 or 5 lines, So when we get bit, a lot of times we get a lot of doubles and triples. So everyone's pretty much involved. So there's not enough time to sit there and slug beers. If there is, then I'm not doing my job.
I was
I was
always
on a
excited.
charter with Chris
Oh
once.
yeah, Dan brought one guy once. That's
I was
right.
on a
Really?
charter. It was a guy that I brought that brought a guy. That's what it was.
He brought a guy.
And
that
I
brought
think
a
he
guy.
drank. He brought Coronas, so glass bottles on the boat, and he drank like 24 of them in the 4-hour period.
Wow.
Like that's no
Dude.
exaggeration. Like he
Dude,
actually
no,
drank,
he.
like, 20.
I saw him. I thought he just had one 12-pack, and like, was it that much? Did he have 24?
He's probably drank about 18.
We went in a little early to make sure things were safe.
Yeah.
Let's put
Yeah.
it that way. I mean, he wasn't
worst-
rambunctious or anything, but he was.
He did take a fall. That was
He
like
did.
okay.
He
this
did
is,
like stand up. Like all of a sudden, he stood up and he was like, "Whoa!" And like we were anchored up and spot locking. And I just look in the barrel. I'm like, oh my God, he killed that 12-pack. And Dan's like, yeah, he's like halfway on the other one. I'm like, we've only been here for like an hour. Holy shit.
Wow. That's
So-
that's a feat. Yeah. He was
Yeah.
on a mission.
I didn't know whether to be pissed or impressed. It was like
Right? Yeah. I'm like I'm almost impressed. Yeah.
Well, he slipped a little bit. We got him in the timeout corner and went in.
Yeah, that was in the
that's-
Parker
that's-
too. So you had the jump seat in the back.
Yeah, it was just like timeout seat in the Parker down in the
Yep.
back there.
Yeah.
But,
I can see
no-
alcohol and boats are not a great mix. You know.
And it's crazy when I'm out in the boat. Like even if I'm just going out for a ride or just fishing on my own, I don't drink on the boat. It feels weird to me.
Yeah.
Well, if
you're a
I'm
charter
out there,
boat captain,
I'm
you-
focused. Even if I'm on my
Yeah.
own fucking around, like I'm hyper focused at what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So even if I crack one open, like if I'm like I don't know, we went tuna fishing a couple times this year. Like I'd
Yeah.
crack one for the ride out, and I'd probably have like 2 sips.
Well, that's it. Like there's always a celebratory beer for like when we're
course.
fishing that it's not. If not on a charter. So
How
like,
much,
we bought a tuna, cracked a beer.
How much plug fishing do you do like on your own? Like if you have to go out and fish yourself, are you plug fishing or are you bait fishing?
Do you want to answer?
Go ahead.
Take it. So plugs are definitely more of a springtime thing, and then going
Yep.
into June, and then I would say like around Father's Day, it really switches to live bait, and then probably like September going into the fall, we're right back to plugs again.
Nice.
So there's kind of just like I guess the seasons for it. Not saying like bigger plugs don't work. They absolutely do, but just it's a much higher success rate when you're fishing with live mackerel.
I find the times I get an opportunity to fish for myself, particularly because I am a school teacher, so I don't get out, in June as much as I would like to. Like I'm kind of
Yeah.
limited to weekends and afternoons. So if it's like in the middle of summer and I have a day, if it's something where I can go and have fun in the morning and catch some fish on plugs, absolutely. Or I might give it a look. But for the most part, on days that I have off, Steve, I'm playing around. I'm kind of going off kilter to try something
Yeah.
new. Just to
Scouting.
just to scout. Like if I've been fishing south along the beach, maybe I'll fish north. If I'm in the river, maybe I'll move out to the beach or try the
Right.
deep water, or maybe I'll take a ride down to Cape Ann and see what's going on. I mean, that was great for us a couple years ago. We went out one
Definitely.
afternoon
Yeah.
and we just kept going till we saw what we wanted to see. And we had some epic days down there on my charters the next few for like the next couple of weeks. It was really
And that's great because
really
you're
good.
like I've added another spot to my repertoire that I can take people to.
Yeah, and then the other thing about that too is I'm highly focused at that time, right? So then things like tide, wind, water temp, all that stuff I can put into the bank and write down and now
Right.
see if I can pattern it out moving forward. And it's just another feather in the cap type of thing. But usually when I'm fishing on my own, I'm playing around.
Nice.
Or trying a new technique in a new spot just
Yep.
to see what's there,
I love plug fishing though. Like honestly,
Yep.
just like practicing the presentation, the retrieve with certain baits that you're going to use. Like just that whole element of it is so fun, and then when you have a buddy with you, you could be both working the same kind of bait, like who's going to have the better success rate with it.
Right.
Like what's this guy doing that I'm not doing, that
Yep.
type of deal, sharing the information back and forth. But there's nothing better than a topwater bite. I mean, let's be honest,
Of
especially
course,
because
yeah.
fishing on a boat. You know, we're fishing
Dude.
7 foot rods with like ghosts of 6,000s.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That
You know, or
spoon bite
even
was
a 5K.
fun. I like that spoon bite.
Yeah, the
That-
spoon,
that-
spoon bite
Yeah,
is fun.
I
But dude,
that
hear
was
the
honestly,
spoons
I don't know,
are the
top
new
water is-
hot ticket on the boats.
That was the
I don't know
thing
how
I wanted
I don't
to
know how
try
I can
last
apply
year.
that. I don't know how I can apply that in the surf, but I've been thinking about it.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll talk later. But
It's just a lift. It's just a lift and
yeah,
drop.
it's just kind
right?
of a lift,
Yeah.
but you don't have to be completely vertical, which like
Yeah.
most jigging situations.
Right. You can
like,
cast it.
you
and
could-
hop,
you
kind
could
of hop
fish-
it back to you.
Yeah, like I've fished and caught fish in like 6-7 feet of water with them, just scoping the line out and just drifting it as I go. I mean, I don't know how would it play into surf. I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to cast it. You know, that's the only
There's
issue.
some new stuff I want to try this year. There's like some larger. It's almost like a saltwater size, like lipless crankbait
Yep.
that I kind of want to try.
Is
It's
that
made
the
by this
Nomad
company,
Vibe?
Nomad. Yeah.
Yep.
The
Yep.
Vibe. I want to.
Yep.
So I'm interested to try stuff like that because that I can see in a place where I'm not. I can almost make bottom contact with it and kind of hop it back to me. And if it's I can see how that would be effective. That fluttering up and then the drop and then the fluttering up and then the drop.
Dude,
So,
it looks
it,
good.
They crush on largemouth. I don't see why it wouldn't work on.
Yeah,
on
it was such a
stripers,
great
too.
placement for the split ring on that. That's because it's kind of like not on the top of it, not on quite on the front of it. It gives it the perfect angle. But that bait is awesome when falling, and it's also awesome when swimming. So
Really?
yeah, like it's honestly like I feel like it's a dummy-proof lure. It's awesome. Like it just. Does
I've been.
exactly
It's
what
been
it
in the
does.
back. I keep seeing
It's-
it, and I'm like, I got to try that this year.
It's
I gotta
really
try that.
weird to fish because it's such a slow type of retrieve. So you're pretty much like you're cranking it hard for like 1 or 2 cranks. You're bringing it off the bottom, and then
Yeah.
you're letting it flutter its way back down.
Yeah.
So it's like I found myself because I got him at the beginning of the year for spring last year, and I wanted to throw
Yeah.
him at everything and get used to it. But it's not the first thing that's going out for me because it's not a good search pattern lure. But if I'm
Right.
marking fish or I see some birds or something like that, then I'll give it a shot. As far as like just kind of scouting out an area, it just takes too long to kind of bring in for me.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm really big on searching and seeing what's going on before I move.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing I didn't like about it, but yeah, the hits on it are crazy. You have to
Yeah.
be on that drop.
Do you
on
find
that drop,
they hit it like watch your
Yep.
line, like you'll see your line jump on the drop? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just reel in a little slow and just keep that tight contact with my lure still as it's dropping, and
Yeah.
then you'll feel them pick up on the drop, just like kind of like a sluggo or something
Yeah.
like that would.
Interesting. I got to try that.
Yeah,
this
they make
year.
a couple different kinds though too. I would definitely recommend trying the Vibe. They have the Vibe,
Yeah.
like a Vibe Max, I think it is as well.
I
Yeah.
looked
It's
at,
like
I saw it, and I was like, it's just it's like a large lipless crankbait for.
Yeah, and they're rubber
for-
too, so it's cool.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
they're really cool.
Yeah,
and they have BKK hooks on them. They're awesome. They're
Yeah,
wicked
those
sexy
BKK
lures.
hooks are nice.
Dude, I just right before you called, I just switched out the last of like my last like dozen jumping minnows with my BKKs.
Oh,
My
really?
hand, those hooks are so damn sharp. I got
Yeah,
puncher
they're
holes
very
all over
sharp.
the place.
Yep.
So, no, but it's good, and it puts a nice, small, strong hook on.
Yep.
Especially their singles. Their singles are really nice.
Yeah, they make some pretty big vibes too because they come in all sizes.
Interesting.
What's the
Yeah.
biggest one? The gram one.
They have
Probably
ones that
4
are
or
like
5
3.5
inches.
ounces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
3
But
and a
I
half,
think
that's
those
a-
ones are more
okay.
for vertical jigging. There's 2 types.
Right.
One's like a vertical jigging, like for
Yeah, I
black
think that's
sea
the
bass
Vibe.
type of thing.
I mean the Max.
That's the Vibe Max, I
Yeah.
believe. Yeah. I would make a suggestion. I go probably a little bit bigger than you think because I got a couple small ones, and I think they're just a little too small. I probably would have got the neck size up.
Interesting.
So I got the smallest one because I wanted to mimic bait about like that big.
Yeah.
But I really think a little bit bigger, it would just cast a little bit more, stand out a little bit more, to be honest with
Yep.
you. But
Yep.
some of the color schemes are really cool in those too. But that was definitely one last year we got all amped up for. We wanted to try, but all of a sudden we just started getting really big fish that we were hitting on the spoons and big sluggos. So that was kind of like our whole spring.
Yeah, since we're on the Nomad topic though, the Shikari is like an unbelievable lure.
Yeah, that Shikari is nice.
Is
It's
that
like their-
It's
a-
kind of like an
SP
SP
minnow.
minnow.
Okay, I was gonna say I thought it was more of like a jerk bait style, like
Yeah,
sort of,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Yeah,
Yeah, it's
they're
a lot
Nomad.
more
That
angular.
company Nomad. I've seen some stuff. I'm like, you got my attention, Nomad. All right, I gotta check some of this stuff out.
Well, they have great branding just in general too. Everything's like really cool colors, like the pad. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just
Yeah,
like,
I wish
ooh,
they
what's
had
Well,
a
this?
just the
couple
fact
more-
that they're trying. Like, I like any tackle company that's like trying to think, a little outside of the box. What's that other company? I think a Band of Anglers that the guy that
Yep.
used to run Sabile, Patrick Sabile,
Yep.
started. That guy's always thinking of like new, something that's just a little bit different on what's out there. And sometimes that's what it takes, something that the fish haven't seen a lot of. I doubt that the fish have seen a lot of, lipless crank style baits or vibe style, vertical presentations. So I
Are
like
you a
when they
big
think
jumping
outside.
minnow fan?
Oh, I should have a jumping minnow tattoo.
Yeah,
on
I
me
know.
somewhere.
No kidding. We should get a
Um,
tattoo.
but
Try out the Nomad Fatso.
okay,
Riptide Fatso.
Fatso.
Yeah,
Okay.
Riptide Fatso. It's like a little bit bigger
Mhm.
than a jumping minnow, maybe like a half inch to inch, but a little bit wider. And it fishes so well. Like, we're fishing in the Merrimack with the current and stuff, and sometimes it's a little too much for the jumping minnow to really get any kind of walk down. But
Mhm.
this thing just sits really nice. It's got a rattle. It's got the BKK hooks. You don't have to switch them out.
Right.
And I found that one to be like pretty effective for me last year, since we're on the Nomad
Yeah, I mean,
topic.
I love the jumping minnow. My only criticism is, I guess, that I've always wanted to find something that's jumping minnow sized, but just a little heavier.
That's pretty much
because
this. That's exactly
that's
what
that,
this
and
fits.
that's exactly what that is. The
Yeah.
other thing I'll tell you that I use a lot sometimes especially early in the season, mostly for schoolies, I find that sometimes this jumping minnow is even too big. I've been using the last few years. It's made by Rapala. I think it's called the Skitter Walk.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I have one
I
of those.
actually have
Yeah.
a couple of
Yep.
those. But I
Those
haven't
are
used them, I
great.
think.
It's just a little smaller, and honestly, I think they cast better than a jumping minnow because they're heavier for the size that they are. They have
Yep.
a different knock. They have it's a way different sound.
It's like a
than
lower
jump-
frequency,
It's
right?
a lower knock. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a deep knock, and I find that a lot of times those little skitter pops, they're a little harder to cast. I usually will use that on my schoolie rod. I wouldn't be casting them on a full size surf setup, but those skitter pops, I love those for early season. Those have been, probably shouldn't have even mentioned it, but yeah, those things are great.
Yeah. I have one.
Little
Surfland's going to be
secret.
sold out.
Do they
tomorrow.
make other?
Yeah.
Do they make other colors for that? The one I have, I think.
I don't know. I just use bone, white.
Yeah.
just,
Okay.
Just white.
Yeah. So they do. Yeah, they definitely do. All right, I got to find a white one. The one I have is.
I
silver.
know. I don't even know if I get them. I might have got them at Surfland, but sometimes I'll just pick a few of those up at like Dick. I think you can find them at Walmart. Like
Yeah,
they're
they're kind
they're
of everywhere.
super
It's-
common.
yep.
The only thing I will do is I will change the hooks out on those. Sometimes they're super light, or if it's for schoolies, I'll put the inline single hooks on for schoolie season.
When you put the inlines on, do you go double inlines?
Yeah, I do. And I find that the way that you hang them can be a big deal. What am I trying to say? I like to have the hook so it is curled out to the back of the bait. If that
Yep.
makes sense. So there's two ways you can have it curled in, so like the hook is facing the belly. I always hook that outer one out, and then the front one facing frontwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I kind of do the same thing if I go two
Yeah.
singles, right? The belly hook faces forward. It opens forward, I guess. And
Yes.
the back hook opens up if you were to straighten it
Because a
out.
lot of times they'll hit it towards the head, and you want that hook face facing the head because
Correct.
their head. A lot of times will hit it in the head, and then I like having it facing the other way for those ones that are latching on those tail biters that
Yep.
I feel like will catch it a lot better. So that's
you
how
get
I
your hook point exposed on each side.
exactly.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't think the hookup ratio it's never as good on those singles as it is with two barbs or two
Yeah.
trebles. But I'm not as concerned if I'm just out catching schoolies.
Yeah,
like
schoolies
if you miss a
is different,
schoolie,
yeah.
who cares? Like it's not a trophy fish. So
You'll get one in the next pump of the rod half the time.
exactly. So I mean, I'm not too concerned with my hookup ratio in May. I mean,
Yeah.
again, they're not trophy fish, so I'm not too concerned about it.
So when you start talking about your trophy fish season, right? I'm sure you get the first couple out of the box, out of the gate. You're excited. You bent the rod. All right. When
Hmm.
do you start doing your trophy hunting? When you were like, all right, now it's time to put away the little shit. Let's go after
Usually
for
the
big mama.
first and second week of May or June, the little rod goes away, and my sleep schedule gets screwed up, and yeah, you start looking for things that are going to actually peel some drag.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually by the second week of June, um, I'm hoping to start connecting with some big fish.
Yeah, that's pretty much like our schedule too on the boat for the
Yeah,
most part. I mean, makes sense, right?
and there's certain people there's I guess Instagram accounts and other things I'll watch that you know I know that they're pretty regular posters. I know that they're not sitting on fish pictures for weeks. So
Yeah.
when I see them start posting things, I start running a mental clock in my head. I'm like, okay, there's about a week until those fish show up here. And
Oh, all the guys down south, right? Yeah, it's like
yeah,
a
when I
ticking
start
clock.
seeing there's guys that just can't help themselves, and I
Yep.
see it and I go, okay, the
Yep.
clock starts ticking. But
We're like 5 days
for the most
away.
part,
4 days away.
for the most part, I mean, stripers really are creatures of habit. Like within a
Yeah.
week or two, they, for the most part, show up the same time every year. Um, at least where I fish in the estuaries, the first part of my season is very heavy up in the marshes and in the estuaries. So I'm usually in the same areas, waiting every year for them to show up around the same time.
Yeah, we did a podcast with Ben Cahagan and Matt Ayer, and they were talking about one of the fish studies that they were doing and how they are creatures of habit. And some of the fish that they tagged when they recaught them, it was like basically like same moon cycles, like
It
same,
was like the same day. a
and
year
within
later.
like
It's
feet of
crazy,
where they caught
yeah.
them the year before. Like it's pretty
Yep,
wild.
I bet if I was to look back, and I'm not very good about keeping a log, but if I was to keep a super detailed log, like I stand on the same chunk of marsh every year. No, it's not the only spot, but like there are certain like I have we have places that we fish that we have spots worn in because we stand there, and we go there every year, and they show up every single year. What I'm scared about is the year that they don't show up, and I'm
Mhm.
scared that year is coming sooner than later. But that's a whole nother that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the last few years, like there are definitely some spots that aren't fishing as well as they used to.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's just like, is that just how, is it cyclic? Like, or is there, you know what I mean? I mean,
I think
obviously
yeah,
everything's kind of going down a little bit, obviously from probably
yeah.
when we all started this 10, 15 years ago, right?
Obviously, it's not like it used to be. I'm a big believer in there's schools of resident fish,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that those schools of resident fish get somewhere deep in their programming, kind of like salmon return to the same river every year. These fish get it hardwired into them that when I migrate in the summer and I reach this certain point, this is where I stop. This is where I kind of make my summer residency, and I have seen a lot of those spots where what we consider to be our summer resident fish have just really diminished over the last big time over the last 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And even before that, it was in decline, but it's been really noticeable the past like 3 to 4 years. Just spots that used to be an absolute lock. You would go there with a, a dozen eels, and you were fairly confident that you were going to go through every single one of those, and you were going to catch big fish, and they just don't produce anymore. Just the fish
That's
do not
crazy.
show up there.
Well, hopefully, that all starts changing soon, going the other way.
I hope so.
Hey, I got a question for you. When you're fishing eels,
Hmm.
were you always a circle hook guy? Or did you use J hooks? And
Oh no, I
has
was
that new
honestly
how's that new law affecting you?
when they changed the regulation, it was one of the big things that pushed me away from fishing eels.
No shit.
Yeah, because for me, a big thing when I was fishing eels, one of the greatest things about fishing an eel is when you get that thump, and you lower your rod tip and then you just cross that fish's eyes. Like the fact that now you just have to kind of slowly reel up on that fish and just hope that you come tight.
Yeah.
I thought that it was. I mean, I understand the logic behind it, and I understand if you're going to implement a rule like that, you have to implement it across the board. But the way that I was fishing a J hook, we hardly ever were gut hooking fish, and we were actively fishing that rod. You could feel as soon as you would get that tap. If anything, a lot of times we were setting the hook too soon. You'd pull it away from fish. It was very, very rare that I let a fish take that eel for so long that it was so far down in that fish's gut that he was critically injured. I think the circle hook, I think that relates a lot more to guys that are fishing cut bait and stuff like that, and that are maybe not as actively fishing that rod. But I was never a circle hook guy. I like to set that hook.
I remember when they came out that rule. I think it's 3 years ago now.
Yeah, it was a few years ago now.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought about. I'm like, what about the guys fishing eels? Because I never used a circle hook when I fished eels ever.
No,
so that was like you said, half the fun. That
half the fun is just
tight.
waiting for that tap tap and be like, okay, here it comes. I'm gonna slam this fish, and you have to. I mean, when you're fishing, you have to set that hook. I mean, you guys know, like a lot of people don't understand like how tough a big striper's jaw, that upper jaw, like how thick and how tough that skin is to penetrate sometimes. Like, you gotta slam that hook home sometimes.
And oh god, I just got a vision in my head of a couple that I pulled on back in the day.
Right?
I miss it.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Shit.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but it sounds like they're reevaluating the efficiency of a circle hook. Just saying.
Okay, I had no idea.
Yep.
I heard that they were having. I heard that there was going to be potentially some limitations on the amount of live eels, that like the accessibility of live eels. I know that's
really?
been talked about.
That.
Yeah.
In terms of what, it was low and people having a hard time to get them, or are they
I think it's been a resource that I don't know if they farm them, but I mean, I know that a lot of them come down from Maine.
Correct.
But I know that I had heard that they were considering making them a protected species, or like potentially like some class of endangered that would mean that they couldn't be used for bait anymore. I thought I had heard rumblings about that but I could be wrong.
How could they be protected? They're everywhere.
I know.
You throw an eel trap under your docky.
I wonder if it would be for the elver fishery, for the young eels that they get up there in Maine.
Yeah, because
they
do have the
something to do with that, or maybe I misheard,
Yeah.
and it was something to do with that, and not the American eel that we use for bait. I'm not necessarily. Don't take my word for it.
So with the new circle hooks, obviously, and the probable or the inevitable availability of eels. So have you started making more of a switch to lures, and particularly like, are you fishing big rubbers now for the most part?
Last year was a big like experiment year for me, where I did not buy a single live eel last year.
Whoa! Knowing what I know about you, dude, that's a big jump.
Yeah, I did not buy a single live eel last year. I used pretty much those gravity tackle eels for the entire season.
I'm hearing so many good things about them. I never tried them before.
I had my doubts too, and took them out a couple times early in the season last year. And the first night I took them out, that I was out looking for big fish, I caught a couple really nice fish, and I was like, okay, these, I'm starting to become a little bit more confident in them. And then there was a few nights that me and Brian fished together side by side. Like, he went out and bought eels that night. I brought the gravity tackle eels, and I think I outfished him almost every night that we fished together. And that was just like a pure scientific experiment, like us fishing no more than 15, 20 feet away from each other on a sod bank in the marsh. And, so I'm a huge fan of those now, to the point where, I mean, I still will probably fish eels now and then. There was a couple times last year that I wanted to put them on, but I was like, you know, let's
You know,
experiment for one season. It won't kill me for one season. So I'm sure I'll make the switch back to them. There'll be times in the future, um, but
well,
I
yeah,
loved fishing them. I thought they were super versatile in the sense that, you know, not only can you change the color, there's all the colors you can choose from, but with different weights, you can fish them wherever you want in the water column. You're not really at the mercy of that eel controlling, you know, where your
you're
presentation
the
is going.
maestro. You're in control, and especially I'm sure that
Absolutely.
might have actually been pretty helpful fishing those rocks, even though you got a jig head that's going
Yeah.
down faster, but you at least know where it is. And you can control it a little bit better
Yep.
than just
And you
that
guys
eel
know,
kind
like
of do its
you fish
thing.
an eel for sometimes like 10, 15, even after 10, 15 minutes, they start to lose their pep. You know, they're not swimming as hard as they were
Yep.
when you first threw them in. Um, yeah, and with a soft plastic and a jig head, you can keep working that thing sharply. You can work it along the bottom. You can work it up higher. One of the things that I found, which was effective with not only the jig heads but with like soft plastics and the paddle tails, was sometimes just retrieving it and then just killing it, letting it fall. And that, I
Yep.
mean, it's kind of like working those vibrating baits. It's just when it falls and it makes that frantic run towards the bottom, and especially with a paddle tail, when you let that fall, that paddle tail is kicking as it's going down. So it has action while it's falling, and sometimes it's that frantic turn for the bottom that makes them fish like, okay, I got to make a decision now and eat that bait.
Yeah, they're picking it up. They're feeling the vibes from the tail, just going down. They're feeling it in their lateral line. They want to go and investigate.
Yep.
And I think that's something too that, like, we talked about new lure makers coming out and coming out with some interesting things. And the thing that I'm finding interesting every time I see a new lure is that there's like a new little twist, just like a little something to make it swim, to throw a little more wake, right?
Right.
Or maybe just a little more sound, or like a little bit different, angular cuts to make that water flow over that lure a little bit different, to make it behave a little bit differently, or give you a little more control in the situation. And
Hmm.
I really find the nuances in the newer lures that are coming out that I see, like those born to, what are they? The,
What is it?
the Ocean Borns is one that's good,
Ocean Born, I think
and
is
the
the name
Band
of
of
it.
Anglers. Yeah,
Band of Anglers is his new one. Yeah.
they totally
So
have some unique shapes and things that they're doing to get
yeah,
those lures to
even their
plane
top
differently.
waters, like they got some top waters that like a flying squid, I think, or maybe that's been done before. I think North Bar did something like that. But
Yeah,
yeah, he's got some innovative top waters, and he's doing some cool stuff,
always down for good lore talk.
new and interesting things.
So, what is, if I'm getting into surf fishing, right? What's like a good all around kind of size rod and reel for somebody who's fishing? Let's start with Plum Island. Like, what
Yep.
would your go to like newbie setup be
So a
if you had like one
good
kind of do it all to start you off?
well, I generally fish with like a 9 foot rod the majority of
Yeah,
my season. Maybe you might want to go a tiny bit bigger if you're fishing an area like an open beach like Plum Island. It might give you a little bit more casting distance, but a 9 foot rod is going to be something that is going to be fun to catch some smaller fish, some schoolies, and it's also going to handle your larger size fish, your 40-inch plus, your trophy size fish. So a 9 foot, medium action surf rod is probably what I would recommend. Pair that with probably a 4 or 5,000 size spinning reel, depending on what you want to get. You don't need to get a Van Staal or something to start with.
yeah.
That might be something that you work towards if that's the type of fishing that you want to get into. But a decent 4 to 5,000 size spinning reel that's rated for saltwater use. Don't get something that's for you want something that can take a little bit of a splash and not completely rust up.
Blow up. Yeah.
But you don't need to go out and buy a Van Staal just to get into surf fishing.
But somebody who's at the high level, that's going out there, that's really into it, want to take the next step as a surf caster. I mean, the Van Staal reels have kind of been like the go-to for every surf fisherman for years
Yes,
now.
the Van Staal it's for the style of surf fishing that most of the surf guys do around here. it's a great tool. It's an investment, but it's something that is going to help you be more effective in the surf. It's not going to break down on you. They're fully sealed. They're aircraft grade aluminum and titanium components, so they are not going to rust on you. They're workhorses in the surf, and they are a tool for what the surfcaster does that allows him to get out in those conditions and do what you really have to do as a surfcaster to be
And
effective.
like you said, it's an investment, and that reel's going to last you decades if you take any kind of care of it, right?
Exactly. So before I bought a Van Staal, when I was getting into surfcasting, I used to go through. One year, I think I burnt up like 2 or 3 spinning reels, and I spent like a couple $100 on each one, and it was like at the end of the year, it was just like, all right, next year I'm getting a Van Staal because I basically spent as much on a Van Staal this year. So yeah, when I got my tax return one year, and I was like, you know what, this is the year I'm getting a Van Staal, and and then I had that reel for. I fished that reel for probably a good 7 or 8 years before I was like, I need to, get another. I need to add another reel to my arsenal. That was my workhorse for like 7 years.
How much do they retail for now? Are they like $600-$700?
They're like between $700 and $800 depending on the size that you want. There is a less sealed version, the VR, which is more geared towards boat fishermen. It's still very splash and water resistant. It's just not as fully sealed as the VSX.
You're not
line.
swimming with it, right?
Exactly. It's not really designed to be out wetsuiting, whereas the VSX is designed to be out there, designed to be dunked under the water. You can reel with it under the water. You can bury it in the sand. It's fine.
Now talk about this wetsuiting. This is like the second or third time you brought it up tonight. So
yeah, wetsuiting is not.
I know what it is, but the rest of the people listening here.
Yeah, so
Explain
a lot of surfcasters will a lot of times use wetsuits to get out to fish spots that you cannot fish in a pair of waders. Areas that are over your waders, areas that you have to swim a little bit to get out to. I don't do as much wetsuiting as I used to. I used to do a lot of wetsuiting when I was fishing the beaches because we used to get out on sandbars that you could not get out on in a pair of waders. It was, and also we were fishing in areas where we were walking long distances, and it was actually more comfortable to do the walk in a wetsuit than it was in a pair of waders. You'd get super chapped in a pair of waders, blisters. It was actually just better to go long distances in the wetsuit, and you can hop in the water. It was nice in the middle of the summer too, because on really hot nights that you would be absolutely dying in a pair of waders, you're out there in a wetsuit. You open your wetsuit up a little bit. You let some water into the suit. It's nice, especially on a hot night.
So you're going out there in the middle of the night in the wetsuit, swimming out to maybe like a sandbar or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I don't do that as much as.
Aren't you afraid of sharks, bro?
I used to. I am much more afraid of sharks than I used to be because I feel like we have a lot more sharks in our area.
We certainly do
now than we did 10 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think I saw anything inside last year.
Not last year, but every year before.
Before that.
I know, and I know of a few. I know of people that have had their stripers bit in half in some of the areas. Well, I know of people in the surfcasting areas that I fished off the sandbars that they're like, oh yeah, I brought a half a striper in last night, and I was like, I'm done fishing that spot.
I'm good. We talked about earlier, like, is the fish worth it? I don't know.
It's not. I have plenty of other places that I can go and stand on perfectly safe, dry rocks that I can still catch big fish, and I don't need to be swimming with them. So, there is a time and a place for it, but I just don't do it as much as I used to.
Now, all right, so coming from the surf, man, some of the pictures and stuff and videos that you've had throughout the years, you have some impressive catches. What's your biggest one you ever got off the beach?
My biggest was a 52-pounder, and I caught that in the during the full moon of July 2017. I caught it on a redfin.
On a redfin, huh?
Mm-hmm.
No shit, you
Yep.
sneaky son of a gun.
Yep. We were on, and it's crazy that I caught it on a redfin because this was at a time that, I mean, this was in the height of my eel fishing phase. So the fact that I got my 52 on a redfin is crazy because we had, like I said, that was the height of when I was fishing eels a lot. And for some reason, we had a ton of bunker around that particular summer and that July. And we just got on one of our buddies, my buddy Jay, was like, they were on redfins last night. So bring some redfins tonight. So I was fishing with my buddy Jay, and it was a super bright night. It was the night of the full moon, so the actual night of the full moon, and there was not a cloud in the sky. And I was like, this isn't looking good for fishing. But I was like, it was the full moon, so we'll go give it a shot. And my buddy Jay got like a 25 pounder. And then I got like a 20 something pounder. And then probably like 15, 20 minutes after that, I just hooked an absolute just freight train. It just ran and ran. I thought I had a seal on. I was like, this doesn't feel, I'm like, I must have hooked a seal or something like this, or a ray maybe. Like, this doesn't feel, I had never had anything run that unencumbered, just effortless, just peeling
like
drag.
just kept going and going.
Just kept
right?
going. I couldn't even come close to turning it. Finally, it slowed down enough that like I remember making that turn, and I was like, okay, I've gained some line on it, and it felt like an eternity. I mean, it was probably in realistic, maybe 5-6 minutes, but that felt like an eternity. And
you're just so nervous, making sure everything's right, that the line's
just
tight,
making sure,
hooked.
yeah.
Nothing in your way.
We were fishing we were fishing a pretty shallow beach that we were pretty far out. So when I would hook a big fish like that, typically you start walking slowly back towards the beach. So I was making my way back in towards the beach slowly. I'm getting into really shallow water, and I remember that fish coming into just getting it into the shallow water, and just to the point where it couldn't really swim anymore, and just seeing the size of it, and just I froze. Like, it was just that dumbfounded, like, what, like, I've never seen a fish that big. Like,
Dude,
and
my buddy Jay
was like, he's like, luckily my buddy Jay had a 60-pound boga on him that night, and he's a tall guy, and like I said, we were probably in a little less than like knee-deep water at that point, and he was struggling to hold the thing up, to get it so it was all the way out of the water.
Yeah.
And it bounced around a little bit, but it finally settled on like 52 pounds. And
wow.
There was then neither of us had a phone or a camera on us that night.
Of course, that's usually how it works, right?
Of course. So there was a guy that was fishing down to our left, and I had seen his headlight come on a couple times. And I knew who it was. Like, it wasn't a guy that I normally fished with, but I knew who it was. So I started walking the fish over to him, and I was just like, hey, I have a gigantic fish. Like, do you have a camera or a phone? And he was like, yeah. So he took the picture, took my cell phone number, and was like, I'll send it to you when I get home. And to this day, I'm like, I don't understand why he couldn't like send it to me right then. But I was like, okay, because it was like it was on a digital camera, so I guess he had to upload it. But that was the longest. Like, I remember I didn't sleep at all that night, just waiting to get that text of being like, yeah, it's cool that I caught a 50, but like, if you don't have any kind of documentation, it doesn't count. So finally
believe you.
that picture came through at like, I was home for like 2 hours. Finally, at like 3 a.m, that picture came through on the text, and I was just like, thank God. Like, thank God. So
it wasn't Jukes, was it?
No, it wasn't. I don't want to say his name, but I haven't run into him in years. So
yeah.
no.
Wow, that's crazy. What a way for that story to end when you didn't have a camera.
No,
And-
neither of us had a camera. And it was the biggest fish of my life, and luckily there was a guy that was like 75 yards to my left that I'd seen his headlight click on a few times, and I literally walked the fish on a boga grip through waist deep water. So I mean, that fish, by the time I got over there to that fish, like if you look at the pictures, it's on my Instagram, like all the fins are up. That fish is fired up and ready to be released.
Yeah.
Like I was having a hard, because I had to walk him so far through the water over to get my picture taken.
Oh yeah, so you were at least swimming him all the way over there.
Oh
right?
yeah, he was in.
Yeah.
I was walking him through waist deep water all the way, and
Yeah.
kept him in the water. Of all the things like of that, I'm really proud of the way I handled that fish. Like,
Yeah.
he was released strong. So, I don't mean to cut this short, guys, but my headphones are dying, so I think I only have a few minutes left.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Sorry.
hey, no, it's fine, man. We're about an hour and 15 right now, so
Okay.
yeah. Well, just that's a great
I don't mean
accomplishment.
to cut it abruptly like that, but this is dinging,
No.
so I know in a
No, I
minute or
gotcha.
two I'm gonna get cut off here. So
Well, Steve, thank you for coming out.
Yeah, man,
What's your
that was a
Instagram
great chat.
handle so people can follow you and check out your videos and
my
stuff like that? You do a
Instagram
great
is,
job with that.
Steve Gallant 141, all one word.
Yeah.
The number's 141. Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you still
give
do a
me follow.
YouTube channel and all that too?
I have a YouTube channel. I haven't updated it in a while. My most recent video, the one that I did for Surfcaster's Journal, is up on Surfcaster's Journal's YouTube page, so you can see that. It's called Sink or Swim, and I made that a couple years ago.
Awesome. All right, Steve. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you
And,
guys for having
hopefully
me. It was an awesome
Yeah, it was great
chat.
chatting with you, man.
We'll
Thank
see you
Yeah,
out there this
anytime.
summer. Hopefully, we can get fishing together one of these days, either on
I'd
the
love
boat or
to.
on surf. I'd love to, man. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, Chris isn't walking the beach, I'll tell you that.
not right now, brother. Not right now.
I don't. It's a lot. I don't blame you. You guys got enough on your plate, putting your clients on fish.
All right, great. Hey, Steve. So
Thank
I'm
you,
just
guys.
gonna shut this